Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming along to this, we hope, quite informal but very informative session with Yoshihisa Endo, but also Li Yunwei, who both work for ReCAAP, the regional information sharing and capacity building organisation in Southeast Asia, based out of Singapore. Endo-san and Ms. Li are here to attend the IMO General Assembly this week, so we're very fortunate to have a little bit of their time. They are extremely experienced practitioners in the world of information sharing and capacity building, and very much have their fingers on the bottom in terms of what's happening with piracy and maritime crime in Southeast Asia. And hopefully you'll be able to tell us the successes and some of the obstacles to their organisation's activities in Southeast Asia, and therefore how it can become a model for counter-piracy efforts elsewhere, both in the Horn of Africa but also increasingly in the Gulf of Guinea. Mr. Endo will speak for about half an hour, and Ms. Lee will also make some comments, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards for another 30 minutes or so, and we'll finish everything up by 12 o'clock when we're going to have to adjourn for lunch. So to make sure we finish on time, I will hand the mic straight over to Mr. Endo.
Thank you, Christian, for your kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. At the outset, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to Christian and IISS for offering me this opportunity to speak about our organization before the distinguished members of IISS at this prestigious venue, the headquarters of WIWS. At the same time, I'd like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to the guests who spare your busy time to come today to listen to my presentation. I feel very honored and privileged. As Christian kindly introduced, I am the Executive Director of the ReCAAP ISC. The ReCAAP stands for the Regional Cooperation Agreement on Combating Piracy and Armed Robbery Against Ships in Asia, and ISC stands for Information Sharing Center. Quite a lengthy title, but I would like to point out a few keywords involved in this lengthy title, such as piracy and armed robbery in Asia and information sharing, which demonstrate the characteristics of our organization. I would like to touch upon this later in my presentation. So far, allow me to continue to use this lengthy nomenclature for the time being. So much for my introductory remarks, and I'd like to now get down on the agenda. And now the slide shows this is the scope of my presentation today. As I assume that many of you are not familiar with the ReCAAP, such a peripheral and specialized organization, so allow me to start with the background against which ReCAAP was created, followed by our mission and vision, as well as the main pillars of our activities, and then briefly touching upon the recent developments of the ReCAAP to be highlighted, which seems to be of your interest. In the course of my presentation, I'd like to invite our Assistant Director of Research, Ms. Li Yunwei, who is sitting on the other side of the table, to introduce a situation update regarding piracy and armed robbery in our region, and then in addition a few case studies to further promote your understanding about how the ReCAAP mechanism functions on the spot. To start with, let me quote the remarks made by top leaders of the relevant international organization, which manifests the nature of the current piracy and armed robbery that is a serious transnational crime in its nature. Once the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, mentioned, and also the former Secretary General of the IMO, Mr. Mitropoulos, mentioned that in order to tackle this issue, coordinated responses are required. No state or agency is able to combat the maritime crime alone, but there is need for coordinated responses, such as three keywords starting from C, namely cooperation, collaboration, and collectively work together. Let me now move to the background and history of the ReCAAP. Way back in the 1990s, there were concerns in piracy and armed robbery against ships in the Straits of Malacca and Singapore. The number of incidents once hit over 200 in the early 2000s. Some of you may recall that the Malacca Strait was designated as a war zone by the insurance company, such as Lloyd's Insurance Company, and the insurance to transit that strait cannot be applied, and consequently a number of vessels avoid the Malacca Strait route, and Singapore had almost lost its status as a hub port. Against that background, the littoral state responded to the situation on individual and bilateral basis, such as the enhancing maritime patrol by the individual states and through bilateral arrangement between neighboring states. The slide shows a few endeavors made by the littoral states. In the course of the development of these endeavors, there are several initiatives that came up, which examples are also shown in the slide. Those initiatives are still ongoing and to a certain extent contributing to suppressing the piracy in our region. However, against the escalating situation in the region, the country in the region discussed how to tackle the issue from the regional perspective at many regional forums, such as ASEAN Forum. The concept of a regional cooperation by concluding the agreement was first proposed by the former Japanese Prime Minister Koizumi in 2001, and the ReCAAP agreement was first drafted in 2002 by the 10 ASEAN countries and Bangladesh, China, India, Japan, Republic of Korea, and Sri Lanka. All of them were then ASEAN countries at the start of the negotiation of the agreement. The ReCAAP agreement, after a lengthy negotiation, came into force in 2006 as the first regional government-to-government setup focusing on piracy and armed robbery. The ReCAAP policy was officially launched in November 2006 in Singapore. We are now in the 7th year of operation, and now we have increased the number of the members, 19 contracting parties to date, including 4 European countries, namely Norway, the Netherlands, Denmark, and the United Kingdom, and very recently Australia joined the ReCAAP August this year. The slides show the mission and vision of the ReCAAP. They are approved by our supreme decision-making body, Governing Council, which is equivalent to the General Assembly of other international organizations. The 3 pillars of the ReCAAP, which I will elaborate in the next chapter, are information sharing, capacity building, and cooperative arrangement. Also, the vision stipulates the ReCAAP policy is a center for information sharing, not as operational center. Operation itself is done by the law enforcement agency of respective member countries. Among the 3 pillars, information sharing is a key pillar of the ReCAAP activities. Under the ReCAAP agreement, each ReCAAP contracting party shall designate a focal point to be a point of contact. The focal points have several important roles. These include, first, to act as a point of information exchange among the ReCAAP focal points and with the ReCAAP ISC, our headquarters. Second, to facilitate its country's law enforcement activities. The third, to coordinate surveillance and enforcement for piracy and armed robbery with its neighboring focal points. The establishment of a single focal point is a key part of our mechanism. Then how the information is shared. The communication system used by us is a web-based secure network on 24/7 basis called Information Network System. In October last year, the ReCAAP ISC launched a new, faster, and more secured IFM, empowered with better functions. Actually, I carry an iPhone wherever I go, including overseas. And once incident happens and the report is made, it's immediately disseminated through this network system wherever I am. and a certain period of time I cut off the switch so that I would not be embarrassed, particularly during the evening. But they telephoned to my room at the hotel, so I am not so much relieved. And the second pillar of the ReCAAP is the capacity building. Even though the system regarding information sharing is established, whether it effectively functions or not is heavily dependent upon those who operate the system. Therefore, with a view to enhancing the ability of officials concerned, ReCAAP has conducted various capacity building activities every year. The examples are shown in the slide, and among them, a new initiative which started 2 years before is the 3-in-1 cluster meeting. This is aimed at contributing to the smooth flow of information in 3 entities involved in member countries, namely the various governmental agencies, private industry, and neighboring countries' focal points, taking occasion of one meeting in the recipient member countries. So far, it is well received by those who have received our mission, in particular as we directly engage the private industry in our endeavors. We encourage the private industry through this meeting to make a report as much as possible once they encounter the piracy incident. And also through these capacity building activities, what we also aim at is to build the trustful relationship among the focal points. When the incident happens at midnight, focal points who receive the information, he may hesitate to report the incident to the focal point of the neighboring country with fear to wake them up during their sleeping time. However, the delay may cause the time for the pirates to escape from the spot and result in the missing. If the trustful personal relationship among the focal point is established, the focal point does not have to hesitate to telephone his counterpart even if it is midnight. So this trustful relationship among the focal point is very important. So this slide, as this slide shows, we endeavor to promote constant engagement to build trustful relationships among the focal points. The third pillar of the ReCAAP is cooperative arrangement. The ReCAAP's nature as an inclusive international organization creates the opportunity for it to position itself as a specialist agency for facilitating cooperative arrangement with governmental and non-governmental organizations that have an interest in combating piracy and armed robbery in Asia. The center could explore the project in which ReCAAP taps the knowledge and experiences of other entities which share the ReCAAP's objective. The slide shows our current partner organization and maritime industry with which we have concluded cooperative arrangements such as a memorandum of understanding. In addition, we have recently initiated consultation with the European Commission toward building a structured cooperative mechanism with them. Also, like we are here today, we have strengthened our efforts to reach out to the research institute in order to promote our analytical capabilities as well as to facilitate access to their network. Of course, IIS is the one, but other than that, we have initiated reaching out to similar globally reputable research institutes such as Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Germany and CSIS of the United States. We have already established a cooperative relation with the regional research institutes such as RSIS in Singapore and MIMA in Malaysia. Under the cooperative framework, we have carried out such joint undertaking as co-organizing seminars or symposiums. We hope that taking today's occasion, we will promote cooperation with IISS in the fields of mutual interest and mutual benefit, such as the joint undertaking of this event. Now it has taken a bit longer on my part of presentation. I suspend my presentation for a while, and as I mentioned in the beginning, I'd like to invite Ms. Lee to make a presentation on how the establishment of the ReCAAP, along with its mechanism, has contributed to the improvement of the situation regarding piracy and armed robbery in our region, followed by introducing case studies which demonstrate the importance of smooth and prompt information sharing among the entities concerned. So, Ms. Lee, please start.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Kristen, for giving us the opportunity to come here to give a presentation. Allow me to give a situation update of piracy and armed robbery against ships in Asia. This is the general trends. I plot two lines here. One is for Asia, and the other is off the Gulf of the coast of Somalia. So you can see that in 2006, ReCAAP was not formed yet. We were formed on the 29th of November 2006. So there's a total of 135 incidents in that year, and we experienced many years of so-called good years until in 2010, when we reached its peak of 165 incidents in Asia. And we are pleased to announce that up to September 2013, we have 90 incidents. It has on a decline since 2010, and what has caused this is due to the so-called effectiveness of our focal points of the maritime contacting parties in sharing information and also in operational responses through our capacity building efforts with our focal points. That I'll elaborate a little bit more later from the case studies. How do we analyze our incidents? Numbers are just digits, it doesn't tell us anything. So what we did was we actually did some analysis of the numbers. You may call that qualitative analysis, but before that we adopt the definition of piracy and armed robbery against ships very strictly according to UNCLOS definition and the IMO definition. This is important because that will also mean the kind of responses by the authorities if it's a case of piracy or it is a case of robbery at ports and anchorages. So what we did is we determined the severity of each incident based on the violence and the economic loss involved. We have a matrix, we derive a matrix whereby we, based on these factors, come to a so-called evaluation of that particular incident of four types, one of the four types of categories. Cat 1 is the very significant one involving hijacking of vessels, and the least or minimum significance is petty theft, mostly occurred at ports and anchorages. So with that in mind, this is the significant level for 2008 until 2012 annual numbers. So you compare to 2011, you look at the numbers. This year, Cat 2 and Cat 3, Cat 2 and Cat 3 are status quo, and whereas you can see that Cat 1, the number has decreased from 8. It had gone back to the same level as the past few years, and if you compare across this period, the total number is the lowest in 2012 and also a reduce in the severity level. Now, I look at the first 9 months of this year, comparing to the same period in the past 4 years. Overall, there's still a decline in the overall numbers and severity level. The point to note here is, for the first 9 months of this year, there was no Cat 1 incident, and we experienced also a lowest number of Cat 2 incidents. Cat 2 incidents are mainly of moderate significance and incidents involving vessels who are underway, whereby mostly happen in South China Sea. And however, there is an increase in the Cat 3 and petty theft, most of this at ports and anchorages. This is the location of the incidents for the first 9 months of this year. Of the total number, 80% happened at ports and anchorages. I think this is quite common, and most of these are Cat 3 and petty theft. And 3/4 of these incidents occurred at the ports and anchorages of those areas, which is Indonesia, Palawan, Dumai, Tanjung Priok, Balikpapan, and most of these are off East Kalimantan, if you can see from the chart over here. And 20% actually involving vessels who are underway in the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, and I will talk a little bit more on this most of these are robberies on board barges, especially for the first 9 months of this year. And also through 2 case studies on the siphoning of marine gas oil to elaborate on the mechanism of the ReCAAP information sharing system and cooperation with the regional authorities. So incidents involving tugboats towing barges, for this particular case, I go even until October. The reason why I include October because there is a surge in the number of incidents in October involving incidents on board barges. So you can see that most of the incidents happen in the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, and most of them, if you look at the color of the location of these incidents, they are petty theft. Petty theft means we have 1 or 2 robbers go on board to take something, and in most of the cases when they are spotted, they will just left the vessel without taking anything. So they are petty theft. And the modus operandi is that we noticed that for the first 10 months of this year, they actually bought unmanned barges. In fact, just before I came, I just went to a company to interview, together with the Singapore Police Coast Guard and the Singapore Navy, interview a tugboat company whose barges loaded with scrap metal was actually robbed during bright daylight, whereby the small boat just come by and unload the scrap metal and move away, another boat come and then just move away. So this is one of the modus operandi that they do. But once they are spotted or they see authorities, vessels around, they will just left without causing harm to the crew. So due to this particular situation, in fact, even before 2013, we have quite a few of cases of robberies on board tugboats, as well as hijacking of tugboats. If you refer to our website, we share some of the case studies of tugboats that has been hijacked, crew has been abandoned, but rescued later on by passing vessel. And through the network of the ReCAAP information sharing, the hijacked vessels were recovered, most of them in the Philippines, with the name change and also the so-called the proper documents also on board, ready to be sold to another buyer. So this is the modus operandi. So arising from this series of incidents that happened, ReCAAP together with the Information Fusion Center, I guess some of you here may know, they are actually part of the Republic of Singapore Navy. We came up with a tugboat and barge guide. And this particular guide actually is a consolidation of the so-called, we call that the intelligence or the good inputs from owners whose vessel has been robbed before or hijacked. So what we did is that when we came out with this, we went to talk to them, and arising from incidents that happened on board their barges or a tugboat, they came out with certain physical measures, procedures, which we gathered from all their so-called their intelligence and their inputs, and we came out with this tugboat guide. And inside there, we also have the checklist that owners and master and crew should adopt based on our discussion with some of the masters and the ship owners, that they should have done this, they should have done that. And one of the key things that we have discovered from this incident is that try to avoid homogeneous crew. We find that in most of the cases that happen, they have one whole homogeneous crew, and that make it more vulnerable for incidents of robbery or even hijacking to take place. So I'm suggesting that there's quite a lot of insider information when instances of this nature takes place, especially on hijacking of tugboats, because second-hand tugboats actually can fetch a very good price compared to the brand new ones. So this particular guide, which is a joint effort between us, IFC and the shipping industry, was produced and was disseminated to all the shipping, so-called the tugboat industry. And we actually gather inputs from owners in Singapore, in Malaysia, and also in Indonesia, because most of the tugboat owners come from these 3 countries. As I mentioned, I will talk about siphoning of marine gas oil. There are 2 case studies which I like to highlight here. The reason why I choose these 2 case studies is because both are quite similar, but the outcome are very different. And you can see that why the outcome is different is because timely reporting and ops responses. For the first case, Meraspi 9, it was very timely reporting. In fact, the agent was the one who reported directly to the ReCAAP Information Sharing Center. And normally what do? What we do is that we will alert all our focal points that, in fact, this particular vessel, they lost contact. I'll go to detail of the incident. But the success, or rather say the the hijack, or rather the siphoning did not take place because of this timely reporting. And why I say so, later I will elaborate further. The gist of it is that authorities were deployed to the area because of early timely reporting. But it's a bit unfortunate is that the pirates escaped and after they cited the presence of the authority, but they escaped without siphoning of the so-called NGO. Unlike Damai 4, which happened not too long ago, it was very late reporting. In fact, it was 4 days after they lost comm. And in fact, 1 day after they lost comm with the master, it was boarded by the pirates. Okay, so attempted hijacking of Morasby for siphoning. It was anchored at Eastern OPL on the 17th of August. In fact, the pictures are provided by the agent also. So after the whole thing has been over, this is what we gathered from the crew. 2 speedboats came alongside. They boarded the vessel, armed with long knife, aggressive, threatened the crew, tied the master. And well, the chief officer managed to activate the SSAS. And that's where the company get to know about it, and they contact us. So this is what happened on board the so-called vessel after they boarded. So this is the location of boarding, and the robbers forced the master to move the vessel to this particular location, which is northeast towards South China Sea. 8 pirates, for what we don't know for what other reasons, 8 of the robbers left the tanker after a few minutes of sailing. Remaining 2 who ordered the master to sail to another place, which is Pulau Lima. It's an island of Malaysia. Now, at this point in time, the 2 robbers noticed that the Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency patrol vessel was approaching Morasby 9. This was because we actually have informed MMEA as well as our focal point. Knowing where the last place where they contacted, we roughly know where the vessel should be. And the robbers left, and the MMEA authorities boarded the tanker. So they did a search for the robbers, and they also did some investigation. So the master launched a police report with the Malaysian authorities. Now this is the outcome that the MMEA shared with us, and this is one of also the key so-called best management practices that we have also encouraged not only Malaysian authorities, Indonesian authorities, as well as our focal points to share their investigation outcome. So this is the investigation outcome they have gathered. Unfortunately, there was no new evidence that they can gather after they board the vessel. Nothing was stolen. And these are some of the suspected motive of the boarding, to hijack the vessel, to bring it to somewhere, to siphon off the so-called the petrol or the NGO, and then to sell it, which happened in Damai 4. So these are some of the best management practices that we learned from this case that we also shared with our tugboat industries as well as our tanker industry. There was timely reporting, and as for the part of the ReCAAP, our so-called information sharing network mechanism will kick into force. We will immediately inform the focal point of Singapore, which is MPA, the Navy, which is also from IFC, and the regional authorities, which is Malaysia and Indonesia. So we understand that MMEA sent the patrol vessel to the area, as well as the Singapore Navy has also sent patrol vessel. At the end of it, well, the agent shared with us the master report, as well as some photograph. We have a more detailed analysis of this particular case. And MMEA has also shared with us the gist of the investigation report. So, but this does not happen in the case of Damai 4. It's a Thai registered vessel on 13th October. In fact, it was the owner who informed. They don't even only inform ReCAAP, they also inform the Republic of Singapore Navy, because they have a Thai liaison officer who works in the Information Fusion Center in Singapore. So actually we share information very closely with the IFC. And what we understand is that the last comms was on the 9th of October. But when we were told about this incident, it was on the 13th of October. So some of the information from the owner is that the vessel departs Singapore for Vietnam. They are supposed to anchor off Vietnam to transfer fuel. last com on the 9th, and when they lost communication, they after a few days, then they start to inform the authorities, including ReCAAP. So we do our part, we alert our focal points, and this is the last contact. What we do, we alert our focal points, we alert the regional authorities, and we publish an incident alert. Now, with the permission of the so-called company, we publish the incident alert because some of the companies do not want us to publish or to make it public, being they're afraid that it may compromise the safety of their crew. But in this particular case, the owner wanted to find their vessel, the tanker. So they asked us to go ahead. And what ReCAAP do is to issue incident alert like this. And this is being posted on our website and it's being sent to our International Shipping Association, who will disseminate to all their members. To actually inform that there's a missing vessel. Look out for the vessel. If they find the vessel or spotted the vessel, report to the nearest coastal state. That is the aim of this incident alert. Okay, on 15th of October, the owner informed us that Daman has been located, the crew was safe, and this is what happened. According to the crew, there was a boarding in the 10, which is 1 day after the last com, and the pirates left, offload the MGO, stole cash, and damaged the navigational equipment. So according to the crew, this is the area location of boarding. What we are not sure right now is where was the vessel taken to for offloading, or was it done as where the boarding of the pirates takes place. So this is still under investigation. Now, Damai 4 is a very good case studies on late reporting, which we shared with with the company, and also we'll be sharing with the tugboat industry. So overall situation up to September, there's a decrease in number. Incidence is less severe, 80% at coastal anchorages. However, there's no room for complacency because now this is only up to September, and more need to be done at the coastal anchorages, which I mentioned just now, especially off Eastern American. And theft on board barges underway in SOMS, Straits of Malacca and Singapore. And we already see 2 cases of marine gas oil siphoning. Overall, I must say that overall improvement can be attributed to the following factors that ReCAAP have always been advocating. Our information sharing network mechanism, not only with our focal points, but with Malaysia and Indonesia, who is not our contracting parties, but we got very good operational level cooperation with them. From what you can see, the 2 case studies, we cooperate very closely with them. And also with the shipping industry, that if there's any trends that we have seen, we'll work out something with them, with best management practices that we can share with them. And we gather together them at certain meetings, whereby we discuss and have some dialogue session with them on how we can improve the situation. Situation awareness and assessment, this is what we are trying to do analysis as well as to give timely updates of a situation in Asia, because this is very key, especially to master when they do their planning of the voyages. And engagement of the industry, Tug Guide is one of the material that we came up with. If you go to a ReCAAP website, we also got this so-called features of consolidated incident report, whereby you within a period you can key in and you see what are the situation like in Asia. And we conduct the annual nautical forum every January. We conduct a nautical forum with the local shipping association. So ship owners, master, CSO, agent, manager will attend this nautical forum. It's a closed door event, no media, and we will present on the annual situation for the past year. So on 14th of January, we will be having a closed door session with all the ship owners and shipping industry together with Malaysian authorities to share on the past 2013 statistics, as well as, way forward, how do we deal with certain situation. If it's an area of concern, how should we factor it, how should we work closely with the shipping industry. And piracy conference, we organize piracy conference during the Singapore Maritime Week together with BIMCO, Intertanko and the RSIS, whereby we have international so-called shipping association members who are in Singapore for Singapore Maritime Week will join us in this piracy conference. We share best management practices and also update of the situation. With that, I will pass the time to Mr. Endo, who will continue with the last part of this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Although the time limit seems to be already over, but the last part of my presentation, namely the recent development, the ReCAAP, is quite seems to be interesting to you. So allow me to take another several minutes to finish my presentations. First is about the expansion of the membership. As I mentioned in the beginning part, the ReCAAP originally started with 14 Asian countries. We are now in the 7th year of operation and have a total of 19 contracting parties to date, including 4 European countries and Australia. Also, United States and France officially expressed its intention to become the members of the ReCAAP. Of course, whether they are accepted or not depends upon the consensus among the contracting parties. Therefore, I cannot prejudge the outcome. However, once they are realized, we have 4 members of the permanent members of the UN Security Council, namely China, UK, US and France, plus a few major regional powers such as Japan, India and Korea will be members of such a small peripheral and specialized organization like us. So this is a very unique development. We cannot predict the effect of this kind of expansion on the nature of our organization. However, basically we are of the view that the expansion of the ReCAAP membership demonstrates the ReCAAP's relevance and the growing credibility in the international maritime community and further underscore the importance of international cooperation in combating piracy and armed robbery effectively. The second, recent development to be highlighted is our increasing contribution to the implementation of the Deputy Code of Conduct, DCOC in short. The ReCAAP concept in combating piracy and armed robbery has made it a model which IMO had adopted for the establishment of the DCOC. Though outside our geographical mandate, the ReCAAP IC is deeply concerned about the piracy situation of the coast of Somalia and the Gulf of Aden, and remains firmly committed to work with other organizations, inter alia IMO and the states concerned. In continuing with the effort and contribution by the ReCAAP toward the implementation of the DCOC, the ReCAAP IC organized or participated in the various activities, mainly these areas shown in the slide. The next slide that shows the several specific contributions made to the implementation of the DCOC over the last 5 years. Among them, notably, we initiated center-to-center dialogue in Dubai in 2011. We agreed to establish operational linkages with the 3 regional information sharing centers of DCOC. To this end, we signed standard operating procedure, we call it SOP, with the 3 regional information sharing centers. Since then, we have regularly exchanged information regarding the incident of the piracy of the respective parties. Today, I recognize that representative of the Oman Embassy is present. With the support of the Oman government, we plan to organize a second center-to-center dialogue toward the beginning of next year in Muscat. On this point, it shall be noted that the importance of establishing this linkage between the 2 centers, namely the ReCAAP Information Sharing Center and the DCOC 3 Information Sharing Center, lies in the fact that by combining these 2 centers, seamless coverage of information sharing network of vital sea lane, starting from the Arabian Sea to the whole Indian Ocean by South China Sea, as far as the Far East and Western Pacific is materialized. Based upon what we had established in Asia, which I aforementioned, we will continue to work with IMO in supporting activities to enhance the development of the 3 information sharing centers. On this note, we are closely monitoring the recent move to be made in DCOC, such as the improvement of their governance, such as creation of the Governing Council and the creation of the Secretariat, and also the expansion of their mandate. Lastly, but not the least, I'd like to conclude my presentation by touching upon the emerging important agenda which we are now facing, that is the future of the ReCAAP from the long-term perspective. About the future of the ReCAAP, the 2 years before, in the history of the Governing Council, we have first taken up this issue, and also we have taken up this issue last Governing Council, and then the governors decided and agreed that they should intensively discuss about this issue on the occasion of the next Governing Council, which is scheduled to take place in March next year. We are now in the process of consolidating the substance and the modality of the discussion to take place at the next Governing Council. The possible items to be taken up at the discussion are, for example, how to further improve our information network system, and long-standing the accession issue of Indonesia and Malaysia, which have yet to accede to the ReCAAP agreement, and the most arguable and perhaps contentious issue, namely the future mandate of the ReCAAP. After its inception in 2006, 7 years have passed, and we have made certain the achievement to date. However, the situation surrounding us has also rapidly been evolving. Under the circumstance, ReCAAP has to squarely address the challenges and set the direction, in other words, the way forward, in order for us to remain to be the body of the relevance to the international maritime community. Whether without prejudice to the outcome of the discussion, it is timely for us to discuss and take up the issue of the future of ReCAAP at this coming Governing Council. I have almost exhausted what our organization is all about and the challenges we are now facing. I hope that our lengthy and technical presentation did not bore you. Now I am prepared to receive question, comment, observation, advice, or even criticism, if any. Thank you very much for your patience and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Endo and Ms. Lee. We have about 20 minutes left, but I think we can push that for another 5 minutes or so to take as many questions as we possibly can. If you could identify yourself and your organisation, it would help our speakers in addressing you. And once your question has been asked, I'm sure between them they'll decide whether who should be answering them. So if you could raise your hand, and I'll move around the room for any questions you might have after the very informative presentation.
Patricio Torres, Chilean military attaché. Thank you very much, in fact, for your very well presented situation concerning the organization. We don't belong to the organization, and my question in particular is to know how do you see in the future this problem about the piracy around the world? To where do you have to extend this organization to be capable? Because this is a matter that in fact will be arising every time a bit more, and if we don't share the adequate intelligence, information, and so on, will be a pit. So we have to do that. And how do you see that on the future?
Again, just before Mr. Endo answers that, I should reiterate again that this is under Chatham House rules, so do feel free to ask the more poignant questions that can't be attributed to you afterwards.
Thank you very much. That helped me a lot. About your question, again, as I mentioned, the future of the ReCAAP, in my capacity as a secretariat, regrettably, I'm not in a position to make any predictions or of course, conclusions or the possibilities. That is up to the discussion among the member countries. which will take place again, as I mentioned, at the next Governing Council to be scheduled take place March this year. The items to be taken up, the 3 items I mentioned. How to improve our information sharing network system, and secondly the Indonesia-Malaysia accession issue. Thirdly, the mandate of the future of the ReCAAP. And as you're aware, our mandate has both functional and geographical. The functional is exclusively on the piracy, not other maritime security issues such as illicit trafficking or terrorism or the drugs and something like that. And geographically, our coverage is eastern part of the Indian Ocean and also the Far East. So from that viewpoint, unless we do not revise the agreement, it is very difficult for us to extend directly the assistance to the other parts of the world. But again, as I mentioned in my presentation, because the DCOC, of course, the Somalia and Gulf of Guinea emulate ReCAAP as a model. So we have over the last 4 to 5 years extended our assistance to them. But there are certain limits for us to do. Namely, we are not able to have assistance directly to the DCOC. And the other issues, namely, particularly you have in mind now more the serious situation, of course, of the Western Africa. That, we have not extended our assistance to date. But that may be one of the agenda to be taken up at the discussion among the governments. Did I answer your question?
Two questions briefly. One is just whether you get a sense that in the future the authorities will envisage a role for private security in Eastern Africa, as they do at the moment, it seems, in the Indian Ocean, on certain ships, both legal authorities and something like that. And the second point is about jurisdiction, prosecution. I was wondering, I perceive your example is very helpful in explaining how ReCAAP is able to target resources elsewhere and use and maybe apprehend suspects, but I was wondering if there's any conflicts or differing views amongst ReCAAP members about what to do with these people once they are captured. And, for example, if the Singaporean Navy captures some Indonesian pirates and chooses to make an example of them, chooses to regard them as a certain kind of person, the Indonesian government theoretically might be upset with that, whether that causes operational problems.
I wonder whether I'll be able to straight answer your 2 questions. But as for the apprehension, in the agreement, the ReCAAP, there is a clause that as the means of the contracting parties, we are encouraged to pass the criminal, the pirates, to the other countries, neighboring countries, among the ReCAAP convention. But it's not the obligation. And this issue...
When you say that, you mean pass Indonesian suspects to Indonesian authorities?
Yeah, at the request of for example, the pirate itself is taking place in the territorial water of one country, and then that the pirates escape from that region to another region, and then the Coast Guard will arrest them, and then at the request of that the original country, they are encouraged to hand over the criminals to those countries, that countries. But this is still the make efforts without legal obligation. And perhaps I would like to explain to you the characteristics of our agreement. This is not a legally binding agreement. Unlike the UN conventions or some other legally binding convention. I think that is one of the reasons why we will be able to have all the ASEAN countries except Indonesia and Malaysia in this agreement. That is one of the contentious issues in the course of negotiation of the agreement, whether we make it legally binding or non-legally binding. And we took the option, the latter, namely the non-legally binding agreement. And did I...
Thanks very much.
James Butler Wright from Aegis. Thank you, Endo-san, for your presentation. You mentioned the cooperation agreements that you have in place with BIMCO, the IMO, national governments and so on. I didn't hear you mention the IMB, either in the head office in London or the Policy Reporting Centre in Kuala Lumpur. I just wondered what your relationship was with that organisation, whether you saw it in competition to yourselves or whether you had a functioning relationship with an organisation that a lot of the commercial maritime industry sees as being a central focus point in the fight against piracy.
The question you raised, namely our relation with IMB, is often put forward to us. And there are a few factors involved the relation between the IMB and the ReCAAP. The firstly, the purpose of each party is different. Ours, as Ms. Inui mentioned, that we encourage reporting to the ReCAAP is in order to lead to the action, namely save, arrest, and rescue, while the IMB is not, in the function to make it an action. It's just for the sake of producing a statistic or anything like that. And also what they do after reporting is without making a classification like we do. They count every incident as a pirate. For example, the petty theft, according to them, it's a pirate. But in our assessment or the analysis, the pirates, the petty theft is a kind of a pickpocketing. It's not the pirates or armed robbery. So that is the difference in the methodology taken between the IMB and the ReCAAP. And again, going back to the first question, namely the purpose of each organization is different. So at least on our part, we do not see the IMB as a rival. I don't know how they see us, but again, the mandate and also the function and the actions are different between the ReCAAP and IMB.
Could I press you a little bit more on that issue, given that we're under Chatham House rules, and say how accurate do you consider the IMB's figures to be?
Well, again, as I mentioned, that they do not make any classification analysis. So again, the incident of a very light nature, such as the petty theft, is counted as the pirates. So naturally, the number of incidents increase. While ours is, although it takes time, but we look into the nature of the incident and make a classification. And I think that reflects the factual aspect of the incident in terms of the private industries to choose a route. Even though the number of incidents are large, the nature of the incident is very light, such as the petty theft from the anchored vessel. Still, the private industries will be able to transit the route. So that I think is a difference again between the ReCAAP and IMB. And at least on our part, reiterating, this is what I'm now saying is the Chatham House rules will not be applied. Please pass that message to IMB. And we do not see the IMB as a rivalry in any manner.
But you have no relationship with them?
Well, we have occasionally exchange information. Yeah.
I want to add on about this Christian's questions about the statistics. In all our statistics, we actually verified with the authorities, either our focal points or IMO. And there are some cases, if you compare the statistics of ReCAAP and the IMB, there are certain cases that ReCAAP do not classify as an incident. And that is because we verified with the authorities, and the authorities boarded the vessel or through their agent, find out actually what happened, and we got the detail of it. In fact, we have a few cases of relating this inputs to the IMO, because IMO, their source is also IMB, among other sources. And they also, based on whatever that were given to them, have declassified or removed the incident based on investigation outcome.
I just,
Please.
I didn't, my name is Peter Aspen from just on my first question, I realised which was about private security law, and by all means chatting on some lots of time, but I appreciate it's not a ReCAAP issue necessarily, but I just wonder, given your situation in the region and the politics of the problem, and that piracy is back on the news, whether you do see private security creeping in again.
Actually, this is the position not only of the ReCAAP but also the IMO. We do not take any position on this, the private security armed guard issue. It's primarily up to the issue of the government and the private industry. And when you mention the East Malacca, Ms. Lee, any situation seriously, because at least in our region, we do not hear any request or any action from the private industry to board security guard on ship. Basically for the transit of course of Somali and Gulf of Guinea, which is outside our mandate. But you may be able to supplement.
If you look at the situation that was presented, most of the incidents occurred are actually petty or taxi kind of incidents. In fact, we have spoken to quite a number of so-called ship owners. They do not see there's a need of employing security armed guards on board the vessel. But there's also questions of arms on board the vessel, especially when you come to the port of Singapore or Malaysia, you will have an issue with that. And also because in this region, especially in the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, the three neutral states, or plus four, plus Thailand, they are doing the joint coordinated patrol. And hence there is no impetus or there's no requirements like in the case of Somalia, that there's need for deployment of armed guards on board. In fact, the various measures that has been taken by the companies in preventing or avoiding boarding by robbers has been quite effective, because we just need to, in our reports we give windows of so-called try to avoid, if you can, area that you avoid a certain time if possible, and certain measures that you adopt. So long as the industry follow, and also because we have authorities in the region, all this information has been updated to the neutral states on a very regular basis, so they know exactly where are the areas of concern. And you can see that there's always a move. When there's an enforcement in one particular area, you will see that this area will have an increase in incidents. In fact, you look in some years back, the South China Sea, whereby there's a lot of incidents. But now it has died down. It's for obvious reasons. And East Kalimantan and Indonesia ports. But Indonesia, I must mention that it's too vast an area, too many ports and anchorages. So it's also a challenge that we are facing. So these are some of the petty theft cases, although petty theft, but also some rooms for concern, especially when the numbers are getting large at certain ports and anchorages. And this information has been fed back to to the international authorities through our other government agencies connections, especially the joint coordinated efforts.
We have time for one more question, and if there's not one from the floor, James, would you like to take it?
One more, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
On a slightly different note, you're talking about the requirement for collaboration and cooperation between your member states. We've seen in the press over the last few days escalating tensions between Japan and China over the Senkaku Islands, the Islands, and the region in which you operate has innumerable potential maritime border disputes and jurisdictional disputes between the neutral countries. Do you find that those disputes between countries affect the cooperation and collaboration between your member states to conduct your mission?
I think the simple answer is no. The one of the reasons is that in the agreement itself, it's clearly stipulated that the problem or issue you mentioned shall not be taken up in our cooperation. And I have to remind you the comments made or the remarks made by the president of the contact group. She made a statement on the occasion of the counter-piracy conference June this year in Dubai. The piracy is one of the very few issues which the objective, in spite of the many different stakeholders, the objective of the members remain the same. I don't know whether I could translate correctly what she said, but you understand what I mean. And the piracy is an enemy for everybody, regardless of whether this is A country or B country or C country, which have some political and diplomatic problem. But the piracy, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, is the transnational crime, which all the member countries tackle with the same position. So luckily we have a lot of member countries which have the territorial issues like the South China Sea or East China Sea or somewhere else. But those the territorial issue has not been brought into our organization. So we are moving in the same direction, namely to combat piracy and armed robbery and suppress them.
I think it's an important point actually, the fact that piracy is seen as a threat by all nations, and that's why we are able to see organisations like ReCAAP be formed. We're even able to see European nations collaborate, which is something that doesn't always happen very easily. So I think the question is whether it is seen as enough of a threat by enough countries to be able to allow collaboration in other areas of the world, such as the Horn of Africa and also the Gulf of Guinea increasingly. But I think it'll be interesting to see whether the model of ReCAAP is translatable in any way, and whether there are experiences and histories within ReCAAP that could help to combat piracy elsewhere. So I think in terms of delivering this presentation, both Mr. Endo and Ms. Lee have provided us with a lot of food for thought on how we might go about suggesting policies and drawing up policies elsewhere around the world as well. So all that leaves for me to do is to ask you to join me in thanking them for their time, and hopefully we'll see them again here at the Institute.